Welcome everybody to Ignite 2020. This is our career exploration series, and today at this session, we're going to be focusing on food-related careers with all things animals. I'd like to start out by thanking our sponsors. You'll see their names listed on the screen right now. We have Redding Goat and the Del Val Alumni Council. Keep in mind also, all of the panelists are willing to connect with you. And if you are unable to stay for the roundtables, we can, of course, provide you with their contact information if you email cspd@delval.edu. So without further ado, I am going to invite our professionals to introduce themselves. So if you could just share your name, your organization, and just briefly what you do for the students on the call. And we will start with Samantha.
Hi everyone, I am Samantha Raynor. I am a production technical trainer with Smithfield Foods located in North Carolina, but we are throughout the United States. Some of my responsibilities are talent acquisition, training on our farm sites as well as our feed mills, and then I'm also over the company's standard operating procedures as well as our standard site visits at this point.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Barbara, would you go next?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Hi, all. My name is Barb Masters, and I actually am the Vice President for Regulatory Policy, Food, and Agriculture at Tyson Foods. I actually work for our General Counsel in the legal department, but I'm a veterinarian, and I kind of sit with one foot in our Government Affairs office and one foot in our Food Safety and Quality Affairs. And I kind of provide science to our legal department and government affairs department and help them understand the regulatory work that we do and make sure that our food safety quality group understands the regulatory requirements that they have to meet and help them make sure that they're in compliance with all the regulations. So I kind of have broad responsibilities across the entire enterprise of our company.
Wonderful, thank you. And Hannah, if you could share.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hannah Patey, and I am one of the talent acquisition specialists at Mountaire Farms. So I sit in Delaware, but we have locations in both Delaware and North Carolina. And my primary job at the organization is to manage all of our interns and our management trainees. So we've got 24 management trainees across the organization. They all report directly to me, and I manage pretty much every step they take throughout the one-year cycle they're with us, and then their placement afterwards within the organization. I also manage and pretty much run the internship program for Mountaire Farms as well. So this past year, we had 34 interns across the organization in multiple different areas, and I was the main point of contact for that whole cycle. So that's what I'm excited to talk to you guys about later on today.
Wonderful, thank you. That's very helpful for all of the students to know a little bit of background. We're going to go into some of the questions that we have prepared for all of you. We're going to start, if each of you can answer this, we'll go in the same rotation. How has your first job, whatever that may have been, how has that impacted your career and where you are today?
So my first job post-graduation was actually in the swine industry, so not much different. I worked for Country View Family Farms, so I did transition from them to Smithfield after about 5 years. The main difference, however, has been my role, because I was in the management trainee program and worked my way up to managing sow farms as well as nurseries and finishers. However, when I came to Smithfield, I pursued more of a training position. I've worked on all the farms here. However, my role is very different from where I originally started.
To take it back to even an earlier job, my first job, I'm going to start with my really first job and how it impacted where I am today. And I actually started when I was 13, and I worked at Woolworth's department store. And the lesson that I learned there that's really helped me and stayed with me throughout my career is that as a youngster in the store, I was willing to work wherever they put me. I worked in pets, I worked in sewing, I worked at checkout, I worked at customer service, and I took whatever I learned in any of the departments and I applied it in the next department. So I knew the prices of everything because I was running around the store. So I became the fastest checkout person. I knew the return policy on dead fish because I worked in the pet department. So that became very handy at the customer service department. And that really helped me move up very quickly at Woolworths. And I applied that as I moved throughout my career. And so when I got to the Food Safety and Inspection Service, which is one stop I made in my career, I started on the slaughter floor as a public health veterinarian. And I ended up working my way up every rung in the ladder and every career opportunity they offered, all the way to the administrator of the agency. And so similar to Woolworths, I really worked in every department. And what I really learned through that is that if you know what everybody does, it's easier to really help bring them into your vision and help them want to believe in your vision as you move forward. And I found that something that really helped me throughout my entire career, and it continues to help me today. So I'd say my very first job has impacted me all the way throughout my career.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of what Barbara said. So my first job out of college was actually in outside sales for promotional products. So I quickly realized within about 6 months that it was not something I wanted to do, and I was not a sales girl. So I was looking for a different opportunity and stumbled upon the management training program at Mountaire Farms. I've been raised around poultry my whole life, but never really was immersed into it until this training program. So the training program took me through all of live operations. I worked in the processing plant for 6 months and successfully did every job in there, and then worked in sales, accounting, IT, purchasing, transportation, pretty much every single department. And that really gave me the opportunity to see what options were out there without really, having to spend 2 or 3 years in one specific department. So that opportunity was fantastic. And I came out of the program working in agribusiness as a feed ingredient buyer for a year. And then they offered me a job in HR. So as you can tell, I've jumped around from sales to a trainee program to agribusiness to now HR, which I've definitely found my home in. But it takes a while to figure out what you want to do, and switching into different departments is not a bad thing. So I think that my first job was, it's obviously always scary when you graduate college and you go into your first role, but know that that's not the end all be all.
Great, thank you so much. This next question, I think you can either elaborate on what you've already said or take it a completely different direction. How has your career either differed or stayed the same than what you actually imagined it would be when you first were starting out? And again, we can go in the same order.
Okay. So I was actually at Del Val, and I was never a pre-vet major. I was just one of those individuals that I wanted to play with pigs. I knew that's where I was going. So I always saw myself really managing a system, working up through the management tiers and hopefully servicing a pot of farms. I kind of have the best of both worlds today, even though I'm not a service person and I'm not managing a site. I work hand in hand with the service specialists and I work with the SOP, so I understand everything that they hold our farms accountable for. So it's kind of the best of both worlds because I'm that liaison between the service person and the farm staff, really understanding how to connect the dots, because sometimes we have really good individuals who are good at production. They're not necessarily the best at teaching individuals. That's not their specialty. Their specialty is getting pigs out the door. So I kind of bring those two groups together to get them to see eye to eye, I guess.
So career-wise, I always knew I wanted to be a veterinarian, but when I started vet school, it was to be a horse vet. Like a lot of people, that's the career I started towards. So I am a veterinarian, but I'm a public health veterinarian. And I always thought I'd be in the small town in the Midwest, and I live in the Washington, D.C. area, so different place. And I never dreamed I'd travel the world. I actually absolutely hate to get on an airplane, and I have now been to every continent but Africa. And so I've had the great opportunity to see the world by working in public health as opposed to working on horses. So a little bit different career trajectory, but I've loved every minute of it.
So I originally went to school, excuse me, and graduated with my economics degree in hopes to go to law school. So I did get accepted to 3 different law schools across the country, and quickly realized that law school is very expensive, and I did not want to have any more debt following me after my undergrad. So I decided to not go into law school, and just didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I felt like sales was a very generalized area that I could jump into and just kind of get my feet wet. Quickly realized I didn't enjoy that. So definitely wanted to be close to home because I'm from the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and that's really where Mountaire Farms started. So funny enough, I ran into somebody who I actually used to babysit for, and her husband works at Mountaire. Ran into her in the grocery store. She asked me what I was doing, post-graduation, and I told her I was really unhappy and wanted to be back on the shore and didn't really know what to do. And she told me about the program, and I applied and got in, and that's kind of how I've kickstarted my career. I went into agribusiness because I had that economics background, and really did enjoy my time there. But again, HR is a place that I never thought I would be interested in, but I absolutely love it because there's so many different facets of it that you can, jump into. So definitely never thought this is where I would be ending up, because I was really planning to go to law school, but now in HR.
Wonderful, thank you. It's really helpful to just hear how you've really arrived at where you are right now. And I'm curious, again, some of you've touched on this already, but you can elaborate. When was that moment that you really found out about this potential career path, this industry in particular? Again, we can go in the same order. You can elaborate on what you said, or again, take it a whole different direction.
So ever since I was very young, I actually raised hogs, which is an oddity. I'm from New Jersey. Not a lot of hog farms in New Jersey, so it really threw my parents for a loop that was my interest. They really tried to get me into like seeing eye dogs. Long story short, I was a junior at Del Val, and they said, if you really want to pursue this, go ahead and do an internship. So I decided to go outside my comfort zone, and I actually applied for Smithfield so that I could kind of get away from home and really be an adult. So the minute I stepped foot on the sow farm, that's when I knew I'd probably never leave the hog industry. It was just, it was the right fit for me. And the good part about it is there's so many different avenues that you can take, once you get into an integrator, especially if they're vertically integrated at any point in time. As long as I have the qualifications, I can completely change my career path, but still remain in the hog industry with Smithfield. So it's been a really good ride so far.
So I've had a little bit of a different career path. I've actually, in public health, I've worked for the federal government, I've worked in industry, and I've worked at a law firm, but doing the same thing, and that's really working in the regulatory world. And the moment that I knew that I wanted to do that really came, I was looking for a career change. I was actually working in the swine industry, on the swine side, loved every minute of it, but was looking for a move. Actually, my husband and I were living about 3 hours apart, and was talking to a colleague, and the federal government had a really bad stigma associated with it, and she and I were having dinner, and she said to me, you're looking at this all wrong. It's not what the job gives you, it's what you give the job. And it was the best career advice anybody ever gave me, because I loved every minute I was at the federal government. I left and went to a law firm and did regulatory work there, and I absolutely love working at Tyson Foods because I love what I give to my job, and that's what I focus on. And so if you really focus on what you're giving to your job instead of what your job's giving to you, you can really make a difference regardless of where you're at. So it was really when that person talked to me and reminded me that I was looking at my job all wrong.
Yeah, I think the moment I knew what I wanted to do with my career, I feel like I'm still coming to that, right? And I feel like that's okay for you to constantly be there in that state. I love HR, and I think that it's a spot that I definitely want to stay in. But again, so many different avenues. And because I've not explored them all and have not sat in a role in all areas, I feel like I can't necessarily say I know exactly where I'm supposed to be at right now. I love where I'm at and what I do day to day, you know, working with college students and bringing them on into their first role. But I know that's not a forever job for me, because I want to continue to grow and, you know, maybe hire people for our salaried positions and director level, VP level. So yeah, I feel like that's just a constantly changing and evolving state for me.
That's so true. Yeah, we're always growing. It sounds like you've all shown the growth that you've either had or are continuing to have, and we're never arriving, are we? We're always continuing the journey. And that's helpful for all of us to hear. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk about obstacles and failures. So if you could all share with us a professional obstacle you faced and how you overcame that.
I think it's twofold when I think about it, which is interesting because the panel is all female, but typically the swine industry is male dominated. So having a younger female come in with, you know, really high goals, I didn't want to stop as an HOD, and I'm continuously pushing myself. It's a challenge because I don't know if they're not familiar with it, but there's not a lot of females at this point in management. Especially in my area. It's predominantly like the human resources department, but my production group, myself and the vet are the only females at this point, which I take it as a source of pride. But what I've had to do in the past is really step up my game and show that I can kind of play with the big boys too, for lack of a better word, that, you know, I can load hogs like they can, I can vaccinate like they can. And that goes a long way in proving, I don't want to say your worth, but that you're willing to stand up to what they're doing too, is just doing it side by side with them. And I've gained a lot of respect by doing that. So that would be mine.
Focus on a little bit different angle from what Samantha approached. I've dealt with some of the same things she has and agree with everything she said. And another challenge I faced being a female in the professional world is the fact that my husband has also got a career. And so we both had careers that we were looking at. My husband is from a small town in the Midwest. And so promotion opportunities for me were all in the Northeast, Washington, D.C. area. And my husband said, that's great, but I'm not going to live in Washington, D.C. And so we had to look at that together and find compromise. And so I actually live in West Virginia. It's about a 2-hour commute, but we have 13 acres and a farm. My husband's very happy. He's a veterinarian as well in a small animal practice. And it's provided me the opportunity to work and achieve the highest level in the federal government, to work as an international public health servant at Keystone Foods, and then now to work at Tyson Foods in their government affairs office. So it's given me all the opportunity I wanted, but it took compromise. My husband became a cheer dad and learned how to do curls in my daughter's hair for a Friday night football because I couldn't make it home to get those curls in her hair. So, it took compromise on both of our parts, but it's something that we had to overcome together, and we were willing to do it together.
Yeah, I would say probably the most challenging time I've had is probably just coming right out of the management trainee program into my first true role in the organization. You go through the program and you're really a jack of all trades, right? Master of none. But you're seen in a light where you've trained in every single area, so you should be 100% competent when you come straight out of the program, right? But you only spent 3 to 5 weeks in each department. So, you need additional training. So when I came out as a management trainee graduate into the agribusiness role, I was the only female in the entire department who then supported the feed mills, which were again predominantly males. So that was definitely a challenge for me to really break that barrier and kind of structure my own type of communication styles with them because they weren't going to talk to me the same way they did, the male buyer who sat right next to me. So that was definitely challenging, but I think it's really just an all in how you build those relationships. And that's one thing I would say is work on those relationships with your internal customers. And I think that's one thing Mountaire does a really good job at is we actually grade our internal customers every week. So what type of service we're getting from them, because we can't provide a product for our final consumer unless we're giving each other that same exact customer service that we would give to our final customer. So again, building relationships, and it's just a learning curve. I still make mistakes. I still come across challenges. So again, constantly growing.
Thank you so much. These are great answers. I know we could keep going on, but we're at our last question already. And I know the students probably really want to talk to you one-to-one and at small group. So in the last 3 minutes or so, I'd love it if you all could share an example of a failure that you've experienced or faced, and then what you learned from it.
Okay. So it's kind of a generalized failure, but it impacted me substantially. I'm naturally an introverted person. I look up to my peers substantially, and I've always had a role where I've had to look up to someone and ask for kind of guidance. They put me over the SOPs for the entire company. And so instead of working with herd technicians, I was now meeting with general managers and telling them what to do. So it wasn't necessarily a failure, but the mistake I made was remaining that personality of I'm naturally an introvert. I'm not going to lead. These are, people who've been in the industry 30 more years than me. So I learned very quickly that I had to get outside of my shell and really, show them that I could do the work. But it took a lot of thinking outside the box, going outside of what I was really used to. So I think that was a mistake, not kind of adjusting as quickly as I should have.
I'm going to give an example of a true failure. I think it's really important that we understand you can fail forward. At our company, we actually have what we call Mistake Monday, because we have to own our mistakes, because if we don't own them, we can't learn from them. So there was a time, and it was many years ago, we didn't have artificial intelligence. We didn't have tools. I was the administrator of FSIS, and I was asked for data from our labor union. And the only way I could get that was actually to go out and have people call and go to every plant to get that information. They did it with their best effort. And they brought me the data. I took the data and I presented it in response to their query. I presented them about 100 responses, and I thought I gave them what they asked for. It turned out their response actually had 1,047, 20 some years later. Yes, I remember what they really wanted. And the way we got to that number was by sending somebody to every plant to get that information. Because somebody had to go through, because we didn't have the Boolean of this and that, this or that, this plus that, because that would have made all the difference of getting the response that they wanted. I got called up to Congress. I had to testify in Congress. I made the front page of the Washington Post in response to my mistake. It wasn't because somebody didn't do what they wanted them to do. It was an honest mistake. But I had to own that mistake, and then I had to put in things in place to make it better. So we put in very rough artificial intelligence that would do those keyword searches. It was a very early version of what's in place today that's had many modifications to it. But I had to walk up to Congress and say, we made a mistake. We could have done this differently. Here's what we're doing in response to it. And you can come through those if you will own your mistake. If you're doing things with integrity and with intent, then nobody's going to hold you accountable. And you have to be willing to make mistakes and fall forward and fail forward. And that's the only way you're ever going to get better. And so I would encourage people to understand that, as long as you're doing with it integrity and intent.
All right. And I've definitely made mistakes in my career. So when I was a feed ingredient buyer, every 2 weeks you reformulate the feed. I'm sorry if you hear my angry coworker in the back barking. I'm working from home today. So we reformulate feed every 2 weeks. And with that being said, levels of ingredients can change in the feed. And so we buy on a 2-week scale. So I forgot to send one of the ingredient orders. And that was probably, 15 to 20 truckloads of a meat blended product that needed to come in and be put into our feed at one of our specific feed mills. And that's huge when it comes to protein levels and what the bird truly needs to grow, right? So I had to own it. Just like Barbara was saying, I had to own it. I had to walk over to the nutritionist and say, look, I made a mistake. I found the email sitting in my drafts. It never sent through. We need to reformulate because we're going to run out of diets for 2 weeks. And that's going to cost even more money than if we reformulated and split the product we did have at the other mills and kind of rearranged a couple things. So again, I could have easily swept that under the rug and blamed it on somebody else, but it was my fault. So if you fail, that's okay, because again, you're going to fail forward, you're going to learn from it, and you're probably never going to do it again because you're going to go back and double check yourself multiple times.